Why is it that the religious are so ignorant of skepticism and atheism? It's like they have no clue at all what any of that actually means. No, in reality, they're just terrified of us, and that's why they refuse to engage with us directly. Because we're not going to take their religious claims seriously without evidence. You know, that thing they have absolutely none of. So let's look at an example of that now. A while back, while we were talking about a list of apologists, Hugh Ross's name came up, and I said that I had at least some modicum of respect for him, but let's be honest, it really isn't a whole lot. I find it hard to respect any con man, religious or otherwise, and religion, whether anybody likes it or not, is nothing but a con. So this time out, we're going to look at an article written back in 2016 where Ross answers a question from a reader and immediately it all goes completely wrong. Now granted, we expect that, don't we? So, let's get to it. We're going to just jump to the question itself and skip all the prelude, and it says, I was talking to a skeptic who wouldn't subscribe to the possibility of the Christian God being three in one. I gave an analogy of the person being mind, body, and soul, and although this intrigued her, she offered that the mind was actually an extension of the soul. Do you have any thoughts or references that I could access to clarify my position? Okay, first off, let's get this out of the way. A skeptic isn't going to accept claims about the Christian God at all. This is way too common among the religious who just assume that everybody's just going to fall over and believe whatever religious bullcrap that they toss out there without running it through their brains first. I'm not going to question a triune God without said God being demonstrated first, and good luck on that. So this is a stupid question to begin with, but I have a feeling that Ross is going to make lots of excuses as we go forward, saying that it's his beliefs that matter, not the questions of the skeptical. Let's see if I'm right. Most Christian theologians conclude, and I would agree, that it is not possible to separate the soul and the spirit of a human. However, standard Christian doctrine asserts that the earthly body of a human is separable. When a human dies, having committed his or her life to Christ, the soul and spirit depart from the body to be with the Lord in heaven. Thus, the body, soul, and spirit of a human is not a good analogy for the Trinity. Every member of the triune God, Father, Son, and Spirit, have always existed and will continue to always exist. Well, why in the hell should we care what a Christian theologian says? There is no evidence that a soul or a spirit or anything like that actually exists, period. Christian doctrine doesn't matter to anyone who doesn't already believe in Christian doctrine. Again, this is just people imagining that everyone is automatically just like they are. So you can't actually talk to skeptics like you talk to the religious, because they're not going to believe what you believe because you believe it. Ross continues, your skeptic friend is correct that the mind is part of the soul. Our soul is the sum of our mind, will, and emotions. Our brain is the hardware interface that allows our soul and spirit to communicate with the physical world. When your brain malfunctions, it can distort or cripple the expression of our mind, will, and emotions. This malfunctioning is most noticeable in cases of dementia. No, that's entirely ludicrous. It's just more evidence that nobody involved in any of this knows what the hell a skeptic is. The mind isn't part of any nonsensical soul. That's just an empty religious assertion. The mind is an emergent property of the physical brain. It doesn't matter if the religious like that fact or not, it is demonstrably a fact. There is zero evidence for a soul or a spirit or whatever ridiculous woo-woo that Ross really wants to push. It just isn't real, at least not demonstrably. Yet this is really where we see the danger of starting with an emotionally comforting conclusion and then running reality through your religious filter. When asked how they'd actually back any of this up, they don't have any answers that don't already assume their religious beliefs are true. Because this whole thing is really just stupid. Then he goes into trying to sell his books and his DVDs, so we're just going to skip over all of that. You notice that he spends a lot of time declaring certain things to be heretical, right? Well, says who? Ross, of course. That's who. It's just Ross declaring that he's right and everyone else is wrong. Why? Because he's right and everyone else is wrong, of course. Remember, this is supposed to be about talking to a skeptic, someone who isn't really going to care about any of this religious minutia in the first place because they haven't been convinced that any of it is true. Now, granted, they might be talking to someone who is already a Christian, but is just skeptical about these specific things. But that's not a skeptic. That's somebody who is skeptical. The two are not the same thing. Any theist who comes up to me and demands that something is heretical according to their beliefs, well, that's not going to convince me at all because I think all of your beliefs are just dumb, at least until they are proven to be factually correct. This is how you know that they're not talking about skeptics. They're not actually talking about atheists. This is just religious masturbation theater, and it's really not at all impressive. The analogies I offer, however, are still only analogies. They illustrate some, but not all of the characteristics and attributes of the Trinity, because God transcends the space-time dimensions of our universe and is fully functional independent of the cosmic space-time dimensions, and because our human powers of conception and imagination are limited by the space-time dimensions, it is impossible for us to gain more than a partial description and understanding of the triune God. Well, that was just a load of religious gobbledygook, wasn't it? If we go way back to the original question, which is what Ross is supposed to be answering here, we can see that none of this actually provides an answer. An actual skeptic, an atheist in this case, but anyone who's actually skeptical of any of this crap, wouldn't even entertain the idea of a God, much less a triune God, without evidence to support it. So we're clearly not talking about any kind of rational skepticism here at all. It's someone who's already convinced that there is a God, but who isn't ready to sign on to the same theology as Ross and the questioner. That just means that, right up front, this entire thing is misleading. And that's not much of a surprise, is it? As to how we can better argue for and establish the existence of the triune God, I have found by experience that one of the best ways is to show people how science makes sense only if God is triune. Yeah, but that's a load of bullcrap right there. Science works just fine with no gods at all. But that's not emotionally comforting enough for these people, so, yeah, they don't even want to consider the possibility. Again, this isn't about skepticism at all. One example would be to point out that love is not possible unless there are at least two persons to express and receive love. Well, that's patently false. I can love my dog. One person required. Now, whether my dog is capable of expressing love back in the same way, that's another question that doesn't really matter because we're very good at interpreting actions to fit in with our existing preconceptions. You know, just like what Ross is doing here. This is just stupid up front. Then he bases the next couple of sentences on his faulty understanding of reality because, like all theists, he's got a goal in mind. It has nothing at all to do with reality. It has to do with his fifis. He really wants to believe in his imaginary friend, evidence or not. Science, therefore, establishes why God, in some sense, must be uniplural, as the Hebrew word for God, Elohim, used in Genesis 1 implies. The uniplurality of God also explains why both singular and plural pronouns are used for gods in Genesis 1, 26 through 27. Except, couple things here. First, who cares what your stupid book of mythology says, because that's just bald rationalization at work. I want a thing, I come up with a reason why that thing might be, therefore that proves I was right all along. Yeah, that's ridiculous. Secondly, this is just trying to rationalize why the Bible is crap. And this is a problem that we've had for a very, very long time. And the religious, they're very good at just making up stories for why the things in the Bible, the things that make the Bible look really dumb, why those are actually A-okay. Yeah, now how about you prove it? Just because you can invent a story in your head that says, hey, this is why it happens. That doesn't mean that's why it happens. You have to do a whole lot better than that, but they never can. See, here's the thing. Science never established anything of the sort, and if you brought that up to most scientists, they'd just laugh. Yet, this isn't about coming to an accurate depiction of the real world. It's about getting your fee-fees stroked. Again, there is absolutely no skepticism involved here whatsoever. It's just two idiots smearing their imaginary god jizz all over each other. One question that remains is why 3 persons, not 2, 4, or more. Both creation and the redemption of billions of humans reveals a division of labor that points to 3 persons. Wait, whoa, hold up there. You still haven't established that there is a God at all. You've just started with these things that you accept for emotional reasons because you really want them to be true, and then, because all of this has to be true because you say so, you're just going on and on and on without providing any independent evidence whatsoever that any of it is actually so. I'm sorry, but faith is not a demonstrable path to truth. But they don't really care about that, do they? This whole thing has just been a gish gallop from a question to, well, here's what we already believe, so we're not going to question any of that, are we? You really need to, though, because none of it has ever been adequately established in the first place. This is just what you wish was so. And I'm sorry, but your wishes and your dreams, they don't mean a thing. Psychologists point out that when 2 people isolate themselves from the rest of humanity, they frequently become codependent in their relationship. A third person breaks the codependency. This need for 3 persons is illustrated in marriage. The bride and groom unite to become one, where the bride and groom become an ezer, essential military ally for one another. However, for this alliance to truly build an increasingly loving relationship and an increasingly productive ministry, the married couple must completely embrace God as their ezer. I have no idea if there's a sound effect associated with rolling your eyes into the back of your head, but that was just stupid. If 2 people do completely separate themselves from the rest of humanity, they are codependent because there's nobody else upon whom they can demonstrably rely. That's just common sense. And this is actually true whether there are 2, 3, 4, 10, yada 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 people. It's not just 2. Any number can work. Now, you're just arbitrarily inserting this imaginary father figure in the sky into the mix without demonstrating that it actually exists at all. It's just making an empty claim that, well, it just has to be there. Yeah, prove it. But they won't and they can't because they don't care. They just need it to be true because they can't imagine that their imaginary friend isn't always there, even though there is no evidence whatsoever for any of it. And here's the other problem. Isn't God supposed to be above all of this? I mean, isn't God supposed to be perfect and self-sufficient? Why would God need 3 people? That's a fair question. Why would God need 3 people? It's not like he's supposed to, go stir crazy if he was out there alone, because he's self-sufficient. And that question comes up a lot, like, why did God feel the need to create humanity? Why did he need a whole bunch of piss ants bowing down and kissing his ass? Why is God so weak? We'd really like to know that, but they don't want to talk about it, do they? In reality, an actual skeptic, if there was one involved in any of this, which sadly there isn't, they wouldn't be having any of this. And it's why they don't actually want to talk to us, because they wouldn't be able to just run around with the goalposts like they do. In conclusion, the universe, its life, and God's plan, revealed both in nature and scripture for the redemption of billions of human beings, reveals the work of three supernatural persons who are one in essence: character, purpose, and plan. So, we've gone through this entire article to find out that he's just saying, "I believe it, so there!" That's really all religion comes down to, after all. It would have been nice if he had actually addressed any of these things with an actual skeptic, but they don't know what those are, do they? They certainly don't want to talk to them because I think they're terrified of us, in fact. Ross has to get on script. Otherwise, he wouldn't have known what to do with himself. And this is true of most apologists, if you notice. They all have this little script in their heads that they're following, and the second that they get off track, they ignore everything else so that they can get back on. This is why all apologists work the way that they do. They aren't there to find truth. They are there to find comfort, often with a paycheck involved. I trust that nobody's actually surprised at any of this because I know I'm sure not.